Okay. So we're going to do a few more things. The planets window, find window has a few different names depending on when you learn Starry Night. I will probably refer to the find window as
Can I interrupt you real quick, Brad?
Sure.
I think that I could help Dennis with this. I just want to go into a room so I could talk to him about it a little bit more. Am I all right to jump in? Do you need me for the next few minutes?
No, it should be fine. Could
you throw me in a room with him?
Yeah, give me one option. 1 second here.
Sorry, everybody. I just wanted to see if I can get this taken care of.
All right, you should see the invite. So Dennis, you should see an invitation to enter a room. Just go ahead and click OK, and that will take you to a private room. Perfect. Okay.
Good.
Back to business. All right. So a few more things that we want to talk about, dealing with not necessarily planets, but the individual objects. So what we'll do here, Steve kind of started us with, you can either click on the hamburger or right click on whatever the object happens to be. In this case, I have Mercury selected. And there are a whole bunch of options here for us. We're going to go through a few of them that you might find useful. The first one here is called center. And what center will do, if I click on that, it's actually going to rotate and position whatever that object is directly in front of me on the dome. So, in this particular case, I don't have a dome, but on pre-flight, what that means is it puts it right in the bottom here. So the pre-flight view and your render box preview window, probably worth noting here. If you've ever used a sky chart before, same type of behavior. It's displayed here so that if you were to take it and just lift it directly up and look at it, it should map up to how the stars and everything appear above you in the sky. So you would just take the S there for south, line it up with south on your horizon, and that's what you see up in the sky, also up on the dome. So just a little piece of information there. So what it's done is on your dome, most people have a majority of planetariums are unidirectional or some form of unidirectional, or everyone's kind of looking towards the front, right? You have a front part of the dome, and that's where it's positioned, that object. So that's all that center does. It puts it in the front of the dome. Another option, if I go back up here, is to magnify. When I click on magnify here, we're going to be zooming in to that particular object, which in this case happens to be Mercury. And we'll zoom in. And there it is. And we have Mercury. So zooming, magnify, all that's doing is you're looking at that object through a telescope. If we take a look at our field of view, at the top right here, we're at 23 seconds. So we've zoomed in on Mercury quite a bit. Notice that the render box status is still 191 degrees. That's because I'm not in live mode. If you look in the left here, I'm off. So right now my render box is still in its home location, which I'm fine with. I'm not really needing that at the moment. But if it was live, then these two should match up. So if once I'm here, if I want to...
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Right, I've got a question. In your view, Mercury is full, and in my view, it's a crescent. Mm-hmm. Is that because of my location here at Fort Leavenworth, or is that something else?
It is something else. This is one of the reasons why you don't have the version of Preview Suite that I have. Right now, there's an interesting bug where a lot of the time, if I go to a planet or I zoom in on it, it's just completely dark, even though it shouldn't be. So that's something that we need to fix before we send it out to everyone. There is an option, a display option under planets and moons. It's called Show Dark Sides. By default, this is typically on. Oh, hey, there. Now it's working. And what that does is it realistically, shades the planets and moons and everything appropriately. It's just I found that sometimes if I, on my version, which is the fairly new version of Preview Suite, if I leave that on, sometimes it's all dark and it shouldn't be. So there's something not quite right going on there. But yeah, yours should look like mine now if you did it from home. Yeah, the parallax between us for the view of Mercury is negligible. So, but yeah, good question. Very good question. So once we're here, once we're zoomed in, if I want to change the magnification, all I have to do is use the plus and minus, and that will zoom me in or zoom me out. So it's like swapping eyepieces out in your telescope. And if I was looking at RenderBox and I have it live mode, then I would see the same motion happen on my RenderBox machine. And a quick way to just zoom all the way back out is just hold the minus sign until it doesn't change anymore. So, all right. So that's how you're, now notice, at no point did we go to Mercury. We were always, I was still in Philadelphia the entire time. I just zoomed in on it. So exactly like, using a telescope. The other option you have, instead of, zooming in on it, magnifying it, is to actually go there. So, one of the other options we have, go there and navigate to. Scott's going to kind of go over this, navigation a little bit later this week. I'm just going to go there because that's what I'm used to. You can try navigate if you want. But what that's going to do is now actually take us to Mercury. So you notice that, my position has changed. I'm no longer anywhere near the Earth. I'm in space. So it's, giving me some distance from the sun. The sun is off to the side there. And boom, there's Mercury. So I am now, if I take a look at my location here, 9,700 kilometers from Mercury. Everyone get to Mercury or planet of your choice? Now, once I'm here, let's say I actually want to be a little bit closer. Starry Night just kind of guessed at the position, the distance you are from the object. So if I want to change that, let's say I want to lower my elevation, the little up and down carets next to the location are decrease and increase your elevation. So if I want to decrease, I just hold down the down and I get closer to Mercury. If I want to get further away, I hit the up. Okay. So I think that's enough to do another couple exercises. So we just have two exercises that kind of go hand in hand. They're just about elevation and zoom. One of the reasons we kind of do them together here is they can produce similar results. Like they can both make Mercury look big, but they're doing it drastically different ways, right? One is keeping us where we are and just zooming in. The other is physically, or at least digitally, taking us to the object that we wanted to go to. So typically the way the stars look can be a little bit of a hint. If you forgot which one you did, the stars can look a little bit different when you zoom in versus when you go there. But the best way to do is check your location and check your field of view. And that can verify right away, okay, I am not at Philadelphia. I'm no longer on the Earth. I actually went to Mercury. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Steve has already shared the 2 exercises, if you don't have them ready to go already. It's the exercises 9 and 10, flying, elevation, and zoom. So go ahead and get to work on those. If you finish, ignore the name of when you open the document.
What did I do?
Like Steve said, we made those a while ago. So.
Oh, the names? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead and do those, and then in a couple of minutes, Steve will take us through them together.
Yeah, I can only share one of them. Sorry. I probably, if I was savvy enough, I could figure out how to do a split screen share or something like that. But tool for this. All right, my friends, I'm going to walk us through these 2 exercises. So the flying to other objects, yeah, all the time. This is something you'll do almost every show. I love doing it, but the flights can, space bar is one of my best friends. So I go flying to Saturn, press the home button. Let's just get back to a neutral place. Using the find pane, use
Hey,
the
Steve?
go there function. What?
Just switch to Starry Night, please.
Oh, thank you. I'm a fool. I need like a little poker that zaps me when I don't do that next time. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this now. I homed it, and I'm going to use the find pane and then use the go there function to fly to Saturn. So I'm going to look for Saturn. And you can see that Saturn's not even up on my sky here, but if I right click on it, I still get the go there. So I'm going to press go there. You're going to see everything's going to start flying there. I don't have the patience to wait for this. I'm sorry. I know this is cool looking, but I'm just going to hit the space bar, and here we are at Saturn. Now use the go there function and fly to Titan. So this is like, you know, if the students are asking, they want to go around. So now you have to find Titan. Remember, all the moons are going to be underneath the different planets. So all I have to do now is right click on Titan, say go there, and here we go on a little space flight to Titan. Now I'm just going to press the space bar, and there's Titan. Now I ask you to use the elevation tool and land on Titan. So remember the elevation tool right here. If you hover over to actually tell you decrease or increase. Every single time I press the wrong one whenever I'm trying to do this live, I should just wait and read what the buttons say, but I have a 100% chance of always getting that incorrect. Something I do, and I don't know, you'll pick up on this when you're doing this on your own machines, is I end up pressing this and starting to go down to the surface, and then I release for a little bit, because what the release will do is actually let RenderBox start moving a little bit. And I like to have something going on in the background while I'm talking. So I tend to do these like halfway, and then I'll release and then start pressing again until I'm on the surface. So here we are on the surface. We've made it. You can see Saturn beautifully up in the sky. Kind of cool. Yeah, I love doing this kind of stuff and landing on different moons and showing the students what that looks like. All right. Now, something that I always like to talk about here. When do I use, I'm going to switch over to the other exercise, which is zooming. When do I use zoom over a fly there? And if I'm ever doing a lesson on a telescope, and what does a telescope do? It zooms in on something. Rather than actually going there. And what's the difference is perspective. You're going to be able to, if you go to a planet, you can see kind of around corners, you start to get weird kind of lines of sight issues. Whereas if you're zooming in on something, you're always going to see basically, give or take, 50% of whatever that object is. So that's the difference of a telescopic zoom. You don't have that kind of weird, both ways are weird, but if I'm ever talking about pictures that we've taken in the observatory, I'll use the zoom because it gives it a little bit more of a recognizable. It's not three-dimensional. You can't fly through things like that. But there are some pretty cool things you can, like the galaxies that are three-dimensional. So that is fun to zoom into them. All right. Zooming to Jupiter. Press the home button. Set the time to 3 a.m. Uh-oh, this might not work for, see, I didn't put a date in here. 3 a.m. Well, 3 is close enough. All right, 3 a.m. Using the find pane, right click on Jupiter and center on it. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Here's Jupiter. I'm going to center on it. You notice that it is highlighted, so thankfully it is still in the sky today. Center on it. And I'll just do that because we can. Now using the zoom, because if I didn't center on Jupiter and I tried to zoom in, it would zoom in on whatever's kind of defaulted as the center of my dome. So I'm now going to use the zoom in right here, this little plus sign. And I'm going to zoom in until it fills the screen. This always makes people in the dome throw up. It's fun. They scream a lot. It's always a good time. You can set the rate for that as well. So if you don't like it going that fast, later on we can show you, you can set that to be slower so it doesn't make the Star Wars effect. So I've zoomed in, note your viewing location. I'm still in King of Prussia. I'm still on the Earth, zoomed in like through a really powerful super telescope from the Earth. Press the zoom button until you're back to a field of about 100 degrees. So I'm going to go back. Well, close enough. Can you see any of Jupiter's moons when you're zoomed in? If you're having a hard time telling, their moons For stars, feel free to label the moons. So real easy. You can go in here and label all the moons. So I probably should be zoomed in a little bit more to see the moons. Somewhere right in there. This is kind of what our telescopes typically would see from Eastern. And now I just say fly to Jupiter. In the find pane, right click on Jupiter and go there. We did this already, but I'll do it just for. So now notice that it's actually zooming me back out before I do the zoom in, which is kind of interesting and cool. So it's zooming us back out. We're going to be on the Earth, and then we're going to leave the Earth. We've just left the Earth, and we're going to fly through space now. So here we are on our trip. And notice that now, when I press the space bar, we're attached to Jupiter. You can see Jupiter up here now, not King of Prussia anymore. Take note of the distance from Jupiter, press the zoom, and now I can zoom in and out from Jupiter here as well. So it's not like because we've left the Earth, I can't zoom in and out anymore. So that's kind of a nice little feature. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Brad. Unless anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Back over to you, Brad.
All right, thank you, Steve. Just a note there, the reason it zooms out before you travel is that traveling while zoomed in to a very small field of view, you think zooming in itself will make your audience sick. Traveling while zoomed in, you'll lose everyone. You'll be cleaning your planetarium for a week. So yeah, Clint puts smarts into Starry Night when he thinks they're needed. In this case, yes, definitely needed. All right. So I am going to take us to, I don't know, someone throw a planet into the chat window, or say a planet. First one that I see or hear is the one we're going to go to. Venus it is. All right. So if I'm going to go to Venus, again, I click the little hamburger here, and go there, navigate to either one. And I'm just as impatient as Steve is sometimes, so I'm going to hit spacebar and instantly get there. And what we're going to do now there are a couple of things that we can do once we are at the object there. So if I want to get a little bit closer to it, I can decrease the elevation. But let's say, I want Venus a little bit higher or a little bit lower on the dome. Maybe I don't like it exactly where it's at. We notice if, as I hover my mouse cursor over the preview screen, most of the time it's the little hand. Every once in a while it turns into something else. When it's that hand tool, if I click, I can then drag Venus up and down on my screen here. And I can also rotate it left or right. Everyone able to kind of follow along there? So I can, lower, if I want it lower on the dome, or I want to rotate it a little bit. Those are the options I have there. So if it's the hand cursor there, the hand tool, that allows me to kind of move it up and down like that. There is another cursor type that's an important one that, let's say we get here, but we want to look at Venus from a different angle. All right, we don't want to just, I mean, it's really cool to see, the Terminator, kind of a crescent Venus this up close. But let's say we want to, see the daytime side or whatever. If I hover over Venus, you'll notice that it switches to like a little box with 4 dots. They're actually arrows on either side. That's called location scroller mode. And when the cursor looks like that, I can actually click on Venus and rotate around the planet. So, notice, unlike the hand, I'm not moving, where Venus is on the dome or in my view. I'm actually rotating around it to get a different view of the planet here. So now I've shifted around so that I'm looking at the current daytime side of Venus here, right? So the hand tool here is for up and down and kind of rotating it. The location scroller is for changing your location, getting a different view of the object. Now let's say, I'm further away from Venus and I still want to, shift around and get a different view. Maybe I want to get it lined up so I can see the sun also behind Venus, all right? It can be really hard, if not impossible, to get my cursor to switch over to the location scroller, because Venus is now so small. Like there are smarts in Starry Night, when an object's big and you mouse over it, it just automatically switches you to the location scroller so you can shift it around. When it's far enough away, it's not necessarily automatically going to do that. So the hotkey here to instantly switch you to the location scroller is the left shift. So if you hold down the left shift key on your keyboard, you notice how it switches to the location scroller cursor type. Now I can scroll around the planet and get that view that I wanted without having to go and click on Venus and move it around. So that's useful even when you're up close, and it can switch automatically. If you want to do big changes, if I hold left shift, suddenly I can click and drag from one side of the screen to the other instead of, okay, I'm clicking on Venus and move it, and then click on Venus and move it again. It just gives me a larger area of the screen to work with, which is very helpful. So again, hold down left shift, click and drag, and that's your location scroller. All right. So those are two cursor types. Those two cursor types that you use a lot. The hand, if you want to reposition stuff, and then the location scroller, if you want to, change the view, the position around the object here. There is another cursor type that's very handy, and this is the constellation selector. So if you want to, you can set the cursor so that clicking on with the mouse, we will turn constellations on or off. Rick, yeah, go ahead. Is that a question? You're muted.
When I hover over Venus, it doesn't change to that location scroll. It did work with the left shift, but I didn't get it to change when I hover over Venus.
You want to make sure that you're close enough, and even if that doesn't work, if it doesn't automatically switch over, I can't remember the last time I did it using anything other than left shift. It's a habit for me. I just automatically, if I know I want to reposition it, I just my pinky is on left shift before I'm positioning the mouse. So
okay.
All right, so yeah, other cursor, the constellation selector. So to get the constellation selector, right-click anywhere in the preview screen here, and it's going to give you a whole list of options. Now, one of the top here is whatever you clicked on, you can select it. So if I right-click on, say, Venus, I can select it, and it's the exact same thing as if I went up here to the planets window and selected Venus. So you'll notice that a lot of these options here, center, magnify, these are options that we get by selecting Venus up here in planets. So it's just kind of another way of accessing those features if you want. Another thing I'll point out, just because it could be useful, with Steve, you flew to, I forget, what'd you fly to, Steve? Titan?
Yep.
And he just, you lowered your elevation until you landed somewhere on Titan. If you're close enough to a planet or a moon or any object, and you right-click on it, wherever you right-click, it will give you the option to go to that latitude, longitude on that object. So if I right-click somewhere over here, now there's a different latitude and longitude. So if you want to land on a very specific spot on an object, you just get close enough and then right-click, and one of the options that you get is to go to that particular spot. So it can be handy. There's a lot of other options here. We don't have time to go through those today. But what I did want to show you is that anywhere that you right-click in the preview screen, the very bottom option is going to be all of your cursor tools. So by default, it's adaptive, and that's why like when I mouse over, it's the hand. Sometimes if I'm over a star, it's actually the selector tool. So if I click, it'll actually label whatever that object is. That's dynamic mode. Control Y is what I use to get rid of it there. What we want is the constellation selector. So if you click on that, changes to a weird shape looking cursor. It's supposed to be like an arrow pointing to a shape. It's supposed to symbolize a constellation, I guess. But now anywhere that I click in the preview screen, it's going to display that constellation. So if I click over here, click over here. So this is another way of turning constellations on and off on the dome. You remember before the break, we went up to the planets and we changed that so that we could see all the constellations. And that's great. You can, if you're turning a bunch of constellations on together, but not all of them, that's a good way of doing it. But if you know where they are, or some kid says, "Hey, what's the constellation over here?" And you're not quite sure, this is a great way of doing it. It's just click in that region of the sky, and it will turn on the constellation that's there. Just a reminder, using the options that you have set over here under constellations. So the show name and the show stick figure. So again, if I want the illustration also on, I just need to make sure that show illustration is on. Make sense? You'll notice that as you click around, as one comes on, the other one automatically turns off. If you want more than one up at a time, just hold down the left shift as you're clicking, or right shift works as well, I guess, if you're left-handed. And that will keep them on. So if I, keep the shift key down and, turn one off, click on one again, only that one will turn off. So hold down shift to add, keep shift held down if you want to just take a few away. And if you want all of them to go away, just let go of the shift key, click on any constellation that's already up, and they all go. It's a little trick there if you don't want to go through and turn them all off individually. So again, to get to that, we right-click anywhere in the preview screen and make sure the cursor tool here is Constellation Selector. And that will enable you then to turn on constellations just by clicking where they are in the sky. Any questions? If not, I think we're going to do another couple exercises here. We have one on using the preview screen and one on cursors. So and Steve has shared them already. So I'll give you a few minutes here to work on those, and then Steve, as usual, will lead us through the answers.
All right, let's walk through these two exercises together and see how we do. When I give planetarium shows, and we give them quite often, I tend to do a show that's already scripted in ATM4, but I do come to the preview screen a lot to try and tweak things or help students see things from a different way. So the ability to manipulate the preview screen and click in here and do it without having to feel like you're clunky is really important. And the more comfortable you get with clicking around and knowing to hold down the shift key or not hold the shift key, it really does help. So the preview screen, I'm going to switch over my share. So hopefully now we all see my pre-flight. I press the home button, no problem. I'm going to use the go there function to get to Saturn. I do this quite often. We don't fly to every planet, and then somebody wants to see a specific planet, and of course, I love taking requests. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say go there. So we're going to go to Saturn, and by this point, I'm just space barring to get there quickly. And for whatever reason, the student wants to see Saturn from like a top-down point of view. So I would say using the hand cursor as well as a location scroller, which is holding down that shift key, make the view of Saturn a top-down view as shown from this picture. So if I just start scrolling like this, it's pretty simple. I can do that. Now notice I can manipulate Saturn a little bit, and we'll get to this later. But you don't have the ability to move it a ton right now across the dome left and right. We'll get to that later. But holding down the shift key, I can get Saturn to have a top-down point of view. You get the cool view of the shadow of the planet on the rings. It's very beautiful. Now, hover over a bright star in the field. This is where a student will say, well, what's that thing over there in the sky? And I don't know. I'm not that good at this stuff. And then what will happen is if you right click on something, I can then select it. So there's Altair. And I can tell the student, well, duh, it's Altair, dude. And it's a good way to kind of help the students if they want to start to see things and try and they ask the questions that you just don't know at the time. That's a really nice way to be able to use that cursor. All right, the next one, constellation cursor. Press the home button. Let's go back home. I ask you to go to about 11 o'clock at night. So if I just press on there, I'll press on this and go backwards a little bit. So something like 11:44, let's go to 11. Make it easy, 11 o'clock at night. Change the cursor to the constellation selector. I do this quite often during our shows, specifically when we actually teach our college students the constellations, and just to prove to them that I'm not lying to them. This is what I use. And this locks in the ability for me to pick constellations out. So I say click around the preview screen. So if I want to show them Big Dipper, Cassiopeia, Cepheus, and then if I want to hold down shift, remember Brad was showing you can do all the major circumpolar for where I live. It's pretty simple. And then if you want to do the really, really awful ones and make the students cry a lot, you can do camelopardalis and lynx. So again, this is one of the most useful tools. I use this all the time. Constellation selecting is like probably the #1 thing most of us will do in the planetarium, for better or for worse. That's what we'll end up doing. Any questions on how to use those tools? These tools are really, really nice. Just you have to know when to use them and how to use them, or else you're going to be crying a lot. Try to do anyway. All right, Brad, do you want to take over for one more thing before we go to a break?
Yep, sure thing. Rick, good question. A lot of the things that we're showing you, yes, can be done with side touch. So like side touch, you can switch between cursors. And with side touch, the beautiful thing is it automatically leaves constellations on as you're selecting multiple ones. So you don't have to hold another button down while you're turning them on. So there are a few things that are adjusted because it's side touch and not your pre-flight controls. But yeah, a lot of these things can be done. You can, just click the sky and move the object up and down. Yeah. So a little hard to show that digitally, but there should be, I think I have a document either in my folder of the course notes or in the service folder that is just shows you different button controls for Starry Night with side touch. And so have the button highlighted and then what the control is. So take a look at that, and that should help you out with those. All right, so we just have a few minutes left here. So I'm going to go back to pre-flight. And I think what we'll do is, we've covered a lot. We've covered a good bit of what kind of the basics of Starry Night here. We have one more of the kind of the core functions that we haven't covered yet. And that is which one? Pop quiz. Which one haven't we covered? Orientation, yes. All wins. So what we're going to do, spend just a couple minutes on, is looking at not orientation itself, but kind of the connection between location and orientation. And this is what we call tracking. So right now, I'm above Venus here, and I'm actually going to go to another planet because Venus is horrible for what I'm about to demonstrate. So let's go to Mars here. I have made the mistake before of trying this out on Venus, and it doesn't work well. And I'm going to turn the shaders off. All right, so we have a beautiful Mars in front of us, and let's say we want to see Mars spinning. We want to speed time up to get Mars rotating in front of us. Well, all I should have to do, right, is to go up to the time rate, and let's say 3,000. Is that going to be good? Well, I don't know, because what am I seeing? Am I seeing Mars spinning in front of me? No, what I'm seeing instead is what? All the stars spinning around me. So what's going on? It's kind of like, instead of, being in a rocket ship or a space station and going around Mars, I'm kind of, hovering with Mars, and everything is spinning around me. So I'm going to stop the time flow here. So what we were doing is exactly that. We were, we flew to Mars, and we attached to it so that we were rotating with Mars. So it's like we have a really long tether from us to some point on the surface of Mars. And as Mars rotates, we're spinning with it. And so what that means is the view that we get is all the background stars look like they're rotating around us, right? Exactly what we see on the Earth, which is why this is the default method, right? On the Earth, we rotate with the Earth. It would be very, very bad if we didn't. And as we rotate with the Earth, it looks like all the stars and everything else are spinning around us. That's great when we're on the surface of a planet, but if I just want a really cool looking planet spinning in front of me, I instead really want to hover above the planet and watch it rotate, right? So to do that, it's actually in the location bar here. So either click on your location or the little hamburger. And down towards the bottom, we have a group of options here called tracking. And that's what we want to play with. So instead of rotating with Mars, let's switch over to hover as Mars rotates. And what you'll probably see is that Mars shifts a little bit on the dome. And now if I hit play, what do we see? Stars are fixed. Mars is spinning in front of us. So we are somehow hovering above Mars and watching it, rotate in front of us. And we actually, have Phobos and Deimos going around there as well. Okay, so if you're, flying around space and you're trying to get a planet, just spinning while it's up there on the dome, it can be a great backdrop. You don't necessarily have to be teaching anything about the planet at that point. It could be an interesting feature visual to have up on the dome while you're explaining something else. This is how you do it. Once you're there, you say, hey, hover as whatever the object is rotates, and start time. So, one last time, if we go to Jupiter, for example, we'll go there, hit spacebar, hit play, and we are, since I already said it, we are hovering as Jupiter rotates there. All right, make sense? Okay, so this is the penultimate of the Intro to Starry Night courses. The one for tomorrow is kind of labeled, I think, review. So that course, it's the second course tomorrow morning, review and exercises. Will be exactly that. We'll cover the tracking method here again, and we have kind of a capstone exercise that combines a lot of these things. What we'll be doing is setting up a top-down view of the solar system. Bradstreet kind of showed you that yesterday a little bit, and so you'll actually be setting that up. And so there are a lot of things that go into it. We have to go somewhere. We have to change our elevation, turn orbits on, speed time up, a whole bunch of things that we've covered. So that's kind of a good one that we'll do tomorrow. And then we have a couple other exercise sheets with random things to kind of go through. And then we might hit a couple of things that I'm sure we forgot that I'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh yeah, we didn't do that. So that'll kind of be tomorrow's course. So for now, it is lunchtime. So if you want to join the Zoom session for lunch, you can get to that from the schedule. After lunch, we are, just verify here. So the majority of you are probably going to be in the session with Scott and Dave, which is kind of it's not going over how to use ATM4, the automation software, but it's why would you want to? So it's okay, you've learned a lot of this Starry Night stuff. Here's kind of the connection. Here's why a lot of what you learn in Starry Night can be useful in making your ATM4 show, and here's why making your ATM4 show can be useful for you in the long run. So it's kind of the bridge between the two. Very useful course. And then after that, Scott and I will take you through the beginning of actually learning ATM4, the automation software. If you're familiar with ATM4, Dan is going to be leading a really useful session. I'm sure his sessions are always great on just show production tips. He's going to cover a lot of, Dan, you want to put a plug in?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to just give tips on how to make full-length shows. That's typically what we do in our planetarium, is we actually produce 15, 20, 25-minute shows, narration, music, animation, all that stuff. And so I'm giving, so if you just, if you are new to it, it's going to be a lot. But if anything, you can use the lesson to see what's possible, because I'm going to show you some of our work, and you can see, wow, you can actually do a lot once you know the system.
Yep. And like all the lessons, it'll be streamed on YouTube, and you can watch it later. So so if you don't go to it, I highly recommend watching it later, because like I said, his sessions are always awesome. So so we'll do that. And then then the intro to ATM4, and then then we'll have another break and another couple options. But that's getting way too far in the day. I can't think that far ahead. So everyone go eat lunch, and we'll see you later. Thanks.